In what one would stereotypically assume is a man's world, loud engines, dirty gears, and muscle cars, there is one woman blazing her own trail, transforming her garage into a workshop for her expansive collection of Porsches. Michelle keeps close guard of her cars, her primary assistant being her son Henry, reflecting the familial connection between that and the cars she works on. It also emphasizes her belief that cars shouldn't be show queens. Keeping her cars in driving condition means a mother's love doesn't always come with a soft touch.
My name is Michelle Hambly-Krobler. We live in Cape Town, South Africa, and I am a Porsche collector. The funny thing is, when this collection started and I started accumulating, my son said to me, "Mom, you need to have an Instagram handle." And being of my generation, I didn't actually know what he was talking about. And then what happened is he said, "No, you post your cars and then people who are like-minded can follow you." And so he gave me the name Porsche Girl CT. And I'll be brutally honest with you, I think I have more followers than all my children put together. And that's how it happened. He basically just picked this name, Porsche Girl Cape Town, and I started posting pictures of the cars with little stories and anecdotes, and that's how Porsche Girl Cape Town came about.
Although Michelle's passion is Porsche, it extends far beyond having a garage which she turned into a workshop. She has raced the cars and traveled the world, meeting Porsche legends, connecting with the global Porsche family. Along the way, Michelle met Matt, a fellow Porsche enthusiast and mechanic, who has his own classic garage.
So this is Dogleg Works. Michelle would have brought you here to show you where her babies come for their services. Basically, we're a air-cooled vintage and classic 356 through 911 service garage. So we have parts for all the older cars. We do everything from full restoration to concourse level to outlaw builds with custom pedal setups and engine builds and, body modification.
I am Henry Muller. I am a surfboard shaper in Cape Town, and I'm Michelle's son. My grandfather, I guess, had a passion for cars. He had an old Mercedes that my grandma used to drive around even though she never had a license. And then he kind of passed it on to my mom or it was passed on to my mom when he passed away. Nobody was into racing necessarily. I mean, we all had a kind of affection for speed, but nobody was into cars until kind of mom really put her sights on it about 15 years ago.
Okay, the interesting thing is that my father was very passionate about cars, and my dad unfortunately is no longer with us, but my grandfather, his father, had a Ford dealership in Ceres, and so we were always around cars. Cars were always part of the discussion. My father was passionate about V8s and Fords. My mother's brother was a man called Leslie Berg, and he used to race stock cars. And in South Africa, we had a track in Goodwood, and my mother used to pack us up on a Friday night. We'd still all have our pajamas on and pack a picnic, and we would go to Goodwood to go and watch Uncle Leslie race his little Gordini Renault around the track. So there were always cars in our sort of landscape and around me. And I developed my real passion for cars when I started collecting. Bought my first car in almost 24 years ago. It was a 68 Fastback Mustang, which was a great car, which we then traded for a 58 Corvette. And then we got a 65 Ford Fairlane and traction Avant Citroen. And then I have a 1928 Dodge called Doris. But then the sort of Kairos moment came about when I had a friend who had a 73 RS lightweight. And I was looking at Porsche because I was quite fascinated by these little cars and I really liked them. And he said, drive it. Well, that was it.
It's always been a passion, obviously, cars in general, but at some point, about 20 years ago, I bought a Porsche. And from that day on, it's just been a slow, steady progression. In fact, the forums in Canada and the US had a lot to do with it. I read a lot of the forums and started working on my own car. And over time, just became something I did more of, and we've slowly built this into a full-time business.
For me, the most interesting thing about a Porsche was that you are seriously encapsulated. You feel as though you are literally being held, and you are so much part of that car. The suspension, the seat underneath you, your steering wheel, the way that Ferdinand Porsche went about designing that car, the dynamics, the aerodynamics, the ergonomics, whatever you want to call it. The car is just, it becomes part of you. And I think that for people who are really into cars and into driving, once you drive a proper Porsche 911, there is nothing that can replace it. There's nothing that can replace the fact that you are so much part of the drive experience, the engine, the noise, the sound, the car just holds you. There's no other word that I can use. It holds you. I really have no fear, which could possibly be a bad thing. But then I raised 6 children, and when you raise 6 children and one who's a downhill longboarding skateboarder, a daughter who went off overseas to go and study, you know, it's, you just, I think your adrenaline levels kind of peter out, and I do drive fast, I'm not going to deny it, and I love speed. I absolutely love speed. I mean, I have a GT3 RS, a 997, I have a GT4, and I don't say I push the envelope, but I like being fast behind the wheel.
Michelle may have begun her journey with muscle cars, but Porsche is now her true passion as she continues to pursue new challenges.
I'm on the fence right now because I would like to build an Outlaw. I will never be able to afford a Singer, but I've got a 964. We've got BBS wheels on it. We're going to put a G50 box in it with a limited slip differential, a sunroof delete kit. I mean, I've got a friend who can actually do that for me, and I'm kind of like on the way to doing that. Then you get people who are purists. And I'm a purist as well, because my 911S, my 911E, those are concourse purist cars. If you're asking me whether a car should remain as original as it came out of the factory, I do agree with you. If you can possibly keep the patina, don't touch it. But if a car has been bastardized, like a lot of Porsche went through a stage where they put the flares on, they arched them. I mean, a 911S or a T that was taken and turned into a turbo or turned into a turbo lookalike, those cars, unfortunately, go new. Go new as much as you possibly can, you know, make the car run properly. If you've got a T that is original, the body shape hasn't been changed, try and find the original parts, try and find the original gear, running gear, door handles, dials, things like that. But there's definitely a place for both in the Porsche community. And I find that people like Magnus Walker and the Singer Porsche and RWB, I mean, RWB is this Japanese man who takes these cars, and what he does to a Porsche is just phenomenal.
Buying an incomplete car is not double or triple the work of buying a complete bad car. And what I mean by that is, you can buy a car that's missing its dash and interior and engine, and and it might look really cheap, but when it comes down to getting all the little parts together to work, you're much better off buying quite a wrecked, complete, unmolested or unmodified car and starting again than trying to buy number one, a project that wasn't successful, someone else down the line, or a car that's just been picked apart for parts and you think you're missing 20 parts and you're missing 420. So that's my number one rule. That's the rule I try to live by, because I've been burnt enough times by buying a car that looks like it's all there in boxes, but never ends up being there. The other rule that I guess you should apply is one of saying, what do I want the car for? If it's something I want to cruise around town in every day, or is it something I want to take into the canyons on the weekends and have some fast, early morning runs? Was it something you want to put the dog and the kids in and head off into the into the farmlands, to the winelands or whatever? You've got to choose wisely in that respect, because these cars can't do all of those things.
I think it's a brand that can continue to live and to become relevant to a younger generation and to people who possibly don't necessarily want a classic, pure, original car, because they've become quite expensive. And quite a few people say to me, oh, you drive your cars, you drive your S, you drive your E, you drive your 356. These are not garage queens. Ferdinand Porsche always said they're meant to be driven. If you think these were built in Germany where it snows and they put salt on the roads, I mean, guys, yeah, they do have souls, but they do need to be driven.
You can see it more in the clients. Even when people bring cars in that they've inherited, that haven't been maintained properly, or maybe they didn't have the budget back then and dad's died and left them the car, and now they've got a good job and they want the car back how it was when they were a kid. And they've been driving this bucket of bolts around, and they bring it in here for 6 weeks, and we replace rubbers and bushes and all the basics that make the chassis feel good and get the brakes working properly and the pedals smooth, and they drive it and they're just blown away that this is what the car actually could feel like, because they've gotten used to that like hobbled, limping version of the car. So we can take it back to that place where it actually feels mechanically sound. And you see it in their face, like right away. Buying a car that wasn't well put together, and slowly over months through Renlist or one of the forums, working my way through the engine and the gearbox and the suspension and getting it right and being like, wow, this car feels so much better. And then the Outlaws are also very unique, because you can take a car that was built with a 4-cylinder engine. We're building one at the moment. We're calling it it's a 356 with a 911 engine. And then you get to feel something that Porsche never built. It's got 200 horsepower, it's got an 800 kilogram chassis, it looks like something from the 50s, but it can take a 308 GTB up a hill. So that's always interesting. There's different angles. Every day is interesting. Every day that you test drive a car is special though.
Michelle's passion for her Porsche collection and a penchant for racing led to a near-fatal accident in 2015.
It's actually very interesting. I have no memory of the accident, which is actually fantastic, because I think if I do have a memory of it, maybe I would handle the cars different, I would think differently.
She was racing at Kailani practice day, and I think on like second or third warm-up lap she crashed on turn 2, which is a right-hand bend. It's the only corner on the track that's actually not got any eyes on it, not visible. So the crash was only heard, not seen. So we're not 100% sure what actually happened.
It happened quite early on. It was a short wheelbase RS that I was racing. We'd actually spent some time tuning it, and I to this day still don't know what actually happened. There's a lot of conjecture that maybe the accelerator pedal gets stuck. There were problems with the track at the time because Killarney was quite rough, and it happened on turn 2. And on turn 2, depending on how high you take it, you can possibly hit a bit of dirt. And I think that's what happened. I think she obviously went off. I tried to overcorrect or understeer. As Walter Roll says, you understeer, you hit the tree. If you oversteer, you're okay. And then I hit the wall at about 130 k's an hour, and shame the car was totally and utterly totaled. And other than that, no actual memory. I mean, I'm still sitting here, so I was very fortunate.
I was driving over Suikerbossie into Hout Bay, I'll never forget. My brother called me. and it's kind of odd for him to call me. Like, we didn't really have like a call each other and say what's up relationship, but he called me and he was like, how's it, how you doing? Like, we had a minute-long conversation before he even mentioned, oh, by the way, mom's been in an accident. She's perfectly fine. I think she just broke her wrist. She got into an ambulance on the way to a hospital, but we don't know which hospital she's going to. So do you think you could call around to her friends and find out where she's going? And at that point, my stepdad was mid-air on an airplane to Dubai, which is like his worst nightmare. So we couldn't actually get a hold of him. I was calling around to all of mum's friends that I know, like finding out where she is. Eventually we found out she was going to Milnerton Medical Clinic. You know, got in the car, turned around, straight there. But yeah, I mean, at the time it was so chilled, like literally broken wrist, she'll be perfectly fine. And then it kind of compounded to the point that she was like in a coma. There was a diffused axiom injury, which is kind of the same injury that Michael Schumacher had with the ski thing, except his was completely severed and hers was partially severed. But yeah, I mean, for the first 2 weeks she was waking up completely forgot, like had no recollection of what had happened. So every day it was like, you know, what happened, why am I in the hospital? But the funniest part was every single morning without fail, the first thing she said was, how's my car? How's my car? How's my car? And every day we had to tell her, no, the car's perfectly fine, even though it was the total write-off, but just so that she wouldn't stress out.
The interesting thing is that I think that the reason I handled it as well as I did, and the reason that I possibly recovered from the accident as quickly as I did, is that I'm strong, because I ride horses. So I have two sides of horsepower. I have a single horsepower, which is a thoroughbred. It's a racehorse that I've owned. I've been riding since I was 5 years old. So for me, riding is part of my daily existence. And when you're controlling a 17.5 hand, 800 kilogram horse, then a Porsche is, you know, it's par for the course. My husband still says, you know, why would you want to ride an animal that has a mind of its own? At least for the car, you've got certain elements that are taken care of. I think I was lucky. I'm physically fit. I've always been very active. And so for me, other than the fact that I did lose buckets of sweat, I was absolutely fine. You can separate the men from the boys quite easily when you, as a woman, go to a place like that. You find there are men who are accepting and who are exceptionally helpful. They will come with advice. They will want to make sure that you are safe. They are caring. And then you get the men who honestly think you are in the wrong place at the wrong time and this is really not for you. You should be in the kitchen at the sink. So I've actually experienced both sides of it. Porsche people, I will however say, have been the most friendly and accepting. The Porsche people that I've raced with have been incredible. From an advice point of view, from a caring point of view, and also from the point of view of the car discussion in terms of what the output is, you know, what the Newton meters were, what the torque is. There was a lot of help and a lot of assistance, and I think it's part of the wider Porsche community that there is this sense of a community that transcends just the fact that they are Porsche. I think Porsche people are very special. I think the most interesting thing for me was kind of because I got into knowing about Porsche and knowing what was built and knowing what was racing and knowing what raced from a history perspective, they didn't like being corrected. And I think that is very much a male paternalistic thing. Do not correct me. I mean, you know, I got to the point where I knew exactly how many 904s were built and how many 910s were built. So in that sense, possibly yes, I could have stepped on a few toes. What I have learned in racing is that every single car is set up for the individual racer. So you don't necessarily walk around a car and make comments without actually getting somebody's back up. Because the car is set up for you to manage and for you to handle. And so you sort of stick to your knitting, if I can say it that way.
I didn't actually really like the fact that she was racing. It obviously was quite nerve-wracking for me to see like my mum on that track. But I obviously did go in support because she supported me when I had a crazy sport idea. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, there's obviously a crew of women that are very close-knit, you know, between each other at the track. But I mean, Mom's so loud and like she really lets her presence be known. So when we're at the track, all I really focus on is her and don't really take into account the male side of things. Yeah, she kind of runs the show when she's there.
I drove a Tesla in Edinburgh. I had the opportunity. It was a phenomenal drive. I will not deny it. The speed, I put it into ludicrous mode. It was ludicrous. It really was. I mean, the power, it is phenomenal. And I think that's the way the world is going to go. And I suppose at the end of the day, we're going to have to embrace it. And I think that what for me is interesting about Porsche philosophy is about preservation. And a number of years ago, true Porsche files will know, Ferdinand Porsche was working on a car that could last for 25 to 30 years. And he didn't believe in built-in obsolescence, the way that our world is going currently. And even then, he realized that he needed to build something which had durability and which had longevity. I think that is where Porsche will remain relevant. I think with the electric car, look, we're not even going to go down the road of the batteries and how they dispose of them, and that is not the conversation we're having right now. I think Porsche as a brand will continue to be relevant because they will constantly push the envelope. And so, will I drive electric? I don't think that, no, I won't. And I think that by the time I'm forced to, I'll be driving my 356 with the fairies and with the angels up in heaven. So that's my take on that one. I think as a woman, we have the most incredible opportunity to level the playing fields. I think that women, as collectors and as preservers and as givers of life, I think ultimately we see a different side. And I think for us it is about the preservation and about the fact that they can continue to run. I think there are collectors out there who are phenomenal, but they are in glass cages, they sit on carpets, they don't get driven. I think the women that I know that collect actually use their cars. They want to make sure that they still breathe and that they still live. And I think that's where women come in and that we can play a role and we can make a difference to the collecting world. So if you're out there and you want to go and collect a Citroen or a Ford or a Porsche, go for it.
Michelle may have begun her journey with muscle cars, but Porsche is now her true passion as she continues to pursue new challenges.